Good evening, everyone, and welcome to an online session of creative writing program of Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology. The creative writing program run by Srishti Manipal Institute is a very special one because it's very different from other creative writing programs that are in and around in India and abroad, because we are not just writing, we are taking creative writing into a different phase altogether. Like ours is an interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, and also moves sometimes into a transdisciplinary kind of engagement where our students will come up with writing, will come up with making films, making animations, making scripts, making installations, and engaging with the communities and different things. They are equipped with socio, political, and historical perspectives and lenses that could help them look into their own writing and writing of their contemporaries and writing classical literary writings. So we encourage multilingual bilingualism in students, and this particular studio, creative writing studio, has students from creative writing and many other disciplines who are engaging themselves into creative writing and into transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary kind of work they have been doing. And today we have two wonderful guests with us. All this started with first part of an interview of writer Shashi Deshpande, interviewed by another wonderful writer, Githa Haraharan. This part, actually, our studio is called, is titled as The Poetic Voice. We were looking into different kinds of poetic voices, and I thought, this is something amazing. And then the very next day, the second part came out. We quickly picked it up into the class, and all our students went through this, and we discussed in the class. And we also thought it's important for us to meet both of them. It's not just somebody interviewing another person. It is both of them in conversation about our times, about politics, society, everything, gender and everything. So I'm very happy to invite Shashi Deshpande and Githa Hariharan here, and I request Kamana to please pin them into the frame. Thank you, Kamana. And I would like to briefly, there is no need to introduce both of them, but still, as a formality, I would like to introduce Shashi Deshpande. Shashi is one of the eminent novelists of her time, of contemporary Indian literature in English. Both of them write in English. And I just love Shashi's English because I'm a Kannada writer. I feel that I am reading it in Kannada. So she perfectly proves that English is one other language in India, and it is not a foreign language anymore. And her maiden collection of short stories was published in 1978 under the title Legacy, and her first novel, The Dark Holes, No Terrors, was published in 1980. Shashi's novel That Long Silence brought her a lot of praise and appreciation in 1990 and Padma Shri Award in 2009. She is the recipient of Nanjanagudu Tirubalamba Award. In 1915, she resigned from her position on the Sahitya Academy's General Council and returned her Sahitya Academy Award. And in doing so, she joined a broader protest by other writers against the Academy's perceived inaction and silence on the murder of M.M. Kalburgi. Shashi has penned essays, memoirs, writing for children, writing on feminism, politics, and responding to our times. Subversion's essay on life and literature, which you see right here, is a recent addition to her body of work. And today, our engagement with Shashi and Githa is initiated from here. So now I would like to introduce, there is a lot about Shashi, but I would want all of you to, if you want, please go and read her books, know more about Shashi Deshpande, and you can browse and get it. Githa Haraharan is an Indian-based writer living in Delhi, and her first novel, The Thousand Faces of Night, won the Commonwealth Prize for the best first novel in 1993. Since then, she has authored many novels and short stories. She has written for children, edited anthologies, collection of translated short fictions, an essay collection, From India to Palestine, Essays in Solidarity, which came out in 2014, and co-edited Battling for India, a Citizen's Reader in 2019. In February 2021, she was detained for 4 days by Enforcement Directorate, which is ED, personnel as part of a raid on NewsClick. She will tell us what NewsClick is. Geetha is the founder member of Indian Writers Forum. The forum runs two sides, the Indian Cultural Forum, which focus on cultural politics, and Guftugu. Guftugu is an online journal that showcases diverse cultural, artistic, and academic practice in India. So, this particular interview came up in two parts on Guftugu. So here we are, Shashi and Geetha. Thanks a lot for being with us today. And we are really, really honored. And on behalf of Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology, I would like to welcome both of you, and our students and guests are eagerly waiting for the conversation that will begin now. Okay. Um, I would like to first ask Shashi um, a question. Shashi, how difficult or how easy was it? This is something completely different from our conversation. How easy was it for you to zoom in, learn zooming into?
That's a question you should not ask me. You're shaming me in front of all these young people. I'm not sure even now that I'm zooming properly. So it was hard, very hard for me to learn this thing.
But you did learn, right?
Yeah, I'm learning a lot of things. I'm learning to pay online now. I'm learning to order stuff online. I think COVID has done that to us.
Yes. Geetha,
Forced
what
us
about you?
to the corner.
Yeah.
Oh, she is a wizard, absolute
Yeah.
technical
Yeah.
wizard.
I specifically asked this question because sometimes it is just understood uh, people are cancelled because of their age, you know, and I think your generation and our generation
She's much
have
younger.
learned to deal with many things in this world. Yeah, Geetha.
I I don't particularly want to cede any space. You may or may not like this awful new way of speaking to yourself, speaking to a screen, and so on. But to do this is better than not speaking to anyone at all. So this is how I look at it. That this is what COVID has taught us. And already we live in a world, in a country where we have multiple languages, the existing divisions of caste and class and gender keep us from having meaningful conversations with each other. So whatever media exists, seize them.
Yeah. So, Geetha, now I would like to ask you, why was it essential for you to interview Shashi Deshpande, and what were your preparations towards this interview? Because all our students have read these interviews, and I think most of the audience have done it. I'm wanting to know, I'm curious.
Yeah, well, I don't really think of it as an interview. And the Indian Cultural Forum is a space where all of us have been in conversation for quite a while. In Shashi's case, of course, we've known each other since her first novel, Roots and Shadows. I happened to be working with the publishing house that had published the novel. And so we've known each other and each other's work for a long time. So this is really part of an ongoing conversation. And I think what's interesting is that our earlier conversations, all those years back, all the decades back actually, were really about the actual nitty-gritty of writing sometimes, but also about getting published. And then, of course, it's sort of like when women get together and talk about relationships between women and men. When writers get together, they always talk about the vexed relationship between writers and publishers. You know, so so that was the conversation. But increasingly, you mentioned, for example, in 2015, how Shashi was part of the huge numbers of writers, scientists, all kinds of people who gave up their awards and who protested against what was happening in the country. So our conversation has widened and deepened, and that is where this began. And as I said, every time Shashi's has a new publication, the conversation, you know, picks up again, or hopefully every time I have something published, you know, we start talking. So that's why it's a continuous conversation.
Okay, Shashi. So now I would like to ask, how did you feel it all through this interview that went in two parts? And since when do you know this great Githa who's been doing so many things all around us?
As she said, we've known each other since, you know, my first novel, and she wrote to me a lovely letter when I got a prize. And she thought the publishers will send me flowers or something. And she said, they didn't even think of it. So, you know, we met on that wonderful meeting ground for writers of Kursi publishers together. So she belongs to Bangalore to some extent. She belongs to Delhi also. So, you know, she used to come here for holidays, and we met in wonderful conversations. She'll come for a walk in the morning from third block where she lives and walk into my house at 7 o'clock or 7:10, and then we have a cup of tea and go on talking, you know. So it's been an intellectual companionship, which I was totally deprived of in the early years of my married life when I was just a housewife and mother. And to me, this has been the richest part of my writing life, that I've been able to have, you know, people with whom I can talk about so many things. And people would look at me and say, Mrs. Deshpande, how are your children? And how are you doing? And how's your husband? And I used to go mad, literally. So this has been very satisfying for me. Githa, and then Shama was there. She's no longer there, unfortunately. So for me, they mattered personally. They mattered in the work field also. So it's been a very long association. It's a friendship, and I hope it continues. Githa, after all this praising each other, let's not go and squabble.
No, no, no. I'm there to connect it. I will never let that happen, because I've been attending both houses. I've been attending the gathering in your place, and whenever I go to Delhi, I meet Githa. And recently, you know, like me, Salma, and Anita, when we went, they recorded, the Indian Cultural Forum recorded all our thing, and it was also part of a bigger thing, and it was wonderful.
Great work that she's doing there, and I think that has sort of given us a platform. That was a wonderful thing, because I had no platform at all. And Githa has always generously given me her platform, including my resignation letter to the Satya Academy, which she said,
I know that.
I know, I kept saying, I must tell them first. She said, don't be silly. You give it to me first, we'll put it out there.
I know.
So her work in this cultural forum has given us a platform which I think is very important.
Okay, leading to this, Githa, I would like to ask you, why was this question of dissent so important to be addressed at this point of time? You have made Shashi speak so beautifully around that. Please tell me.
Yes. I think, well, of course, today of all days, and I want to sort of enlarge the space here and say it's a day of victory for dissent. And just as in 2019, the grandmothers of Shaheen Bagh showed us what dissent is, today the farmers have shown us They've fed us not just literally, but they've fed us with the idea that dissent can win, that it can be heard. And for people like us who are writers and artists and students and teachers, this is really important because we don't see results in a concrete sense. You know, our entire lives and conversations and work are a kind of question of, you know, it's almost like a matter of faith. We assume that this is our framework of values, that people must speak up, that everybody has the right to ask questions, because that's why we have a mind, that's why the human brain is there, and that it's the very basis of a democracy, that we should be able to question what the people we have elected are doing. And we should say, look, you're there to represent us. You are there to speak for us, you know, but don't muzzle our voices. So I think finally, when people ask what is dissent, I don't think it's any kind of heroic protest. You know, there are people out there like the farmers who, you know, whose stakes are very high, or Dalits or the minorities, whose stakes are very high, especially in the present times. Now, for us, what are our stakes? It might seem like our stakes are modest because, you know, the middle class student or teacher or writer can quietly sit in our rooms, but that's not true, because what we see around us, the world we live in affects us. Their stories affect us, you know. So as long as somebody is not free around us, somebody can't speak up, somebody is starving, both literally and otherwise, we can't keep quiet. And I think to just do our jobs, to write about it, to paint about it, to sing about it, to study about it, raise questions, is actually our modest form of dissent. So
You know,
I want to
Gita,
say this because we can't all be activists, we can't all be heroic.
yeah, it's an honor for us. You know, in Srishti, we have spaces which has been created where we open doors for our students, at least in creative writing and other forms of practice. You know, our practice and our pedagogy. You know, it's kind of connected, and all the time we as teachers are also learning as we teach. And I think it's important for all of us. And Srishti Manipal Institute is a space which also respects this and allows this. Yeah, Geeta, thank you for explaining the whole notion around the dissent. Shashi, how do you think recurrence of the intolerance of dissent is connected to the remaking of the Good Indian Women projects in recent time? Now I'm connecting because you have been voicing for women, you have been writing a lot, and please say a few things about it.
I don't know that there's any project of the Good Indian Women. I think women are themselves. And there's this false concept that women should be such and such and so and so. And I don't think any woman would be consciously trying to live according to that. So I would just remove that. I think it is intolerance of dissent comes from greed for power. That's the basic thing about it. In fact, answering Geeta's question, I thought a lot about dissent, and I realized that it's an agent for change. Without dissent, there will be no change at all. I mean, I was just looking up the kind of things like, you know, starting from the Magna Carta and the American War of Independence and the French Revolution, the Russians, our own freedom fight, which, by the way, came in 1947, in case anyone thinks it came in 2014. So our own fight for independence, you know, all these things came out of a desire for change. Like Gandhi stood on the platform in the station when he was thrown out of the train. And what he did was just think in his mind that why has this happened to me? And he decided he's going to change this, that his color is not going to make a difference. I mean, look at like Gita told us about the small, modest things. Here are the huge things that happen out of dissent. So I think in every way, In every way, I think even if a girl just tells her father and mother, I do not want to get married now, I think that's an important decision to make, you know. And I feel that everyone has a space where you can dissent. There's no one who cannot dissent. So I always feel that dissent is the other face of the freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is much talked about and much valued, but dissent is the other side of it, you know, without saying that I do not agree. Freedom of expression is, you know, useless. You got to say what you don't agree with. So like Githa says, look at the farmers. I mean, that has been an amazing thing, you know, almost the way they have put up with the humiliations, the hardships, etc. So it really tells us that dissent can win, but there has to be a lot of will behind it. It's not enough for one or two people to dissent for a big cause. For small, in our personal lives, we can dissent and change our lives. Certainly we can. But for a big cause, you need a lot of people to be part of that. So I don't think this good woman, I don't know where the good woman is, frankly, to tell you, we are all good. I mean,
Yeah. Githa, would you?
If may I add
Yes,
something to that?
please, please.
I think when we're talking about dissent, we have to talk about the siblings and the, you know, the cousins in the family. Doubt, difference, discussion, debate, dissent. You know, dissent by itself doesn't tell you the whole story.
Absolutely.
Which is why we also talk about speculation, imagination, without which neither art nor science is possible. So, so the very first thing is doubt. And this is, you know, we live in times where we hear endlessly and nauseatingly about Indian tradition. And this is, in fact, an Indian tradition. So you have doubt, and then you ask a question, and then you prove it or not. So, but we live in times where in a university, for example, you can't have a seminar. We've had a seminar cancelled in a university in Gujarat because it was on caste. Now, how can you study about India if you can't talk about caste, you know, and so on and so forth. This is just one example. So lopping off entire processes of knowing is one way to say, if you're anti-dissent, you're really anti-knowledge. That's what it is. And then difference. In a country like India, we're an example of this Indian experiment will not work if we do not learn to live with difference, if we do not indeed celebrate it. And, you know, and you were saying, why is it so important to converse with Shashi? You know, we writers live alone and we live in our heads, and sometimes we even wonder whether we are sane because we are sort of wedded to a manuscript for so long. So to look at some of these issues and questions that bother us from somebody else's point of view, just like we look at each other's work. You know, I look at Shashi's work and see how she uses the family as the prism through which to view the country. For me, it's very useful. It's very important. I don't do that, but I learn from that. You know, so this is a conversation not just about how to write, about how to live as a woman, but also about how to survive as citizens.
Yeah.
And Geeta, in 1995, you had challenged the Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act as discriminatory against women. Okay, we would like to listen to that story. What happened?
Yes, I know. That was, well, you know, for various reasons, I was the sort of, well, I didn't have a salary as a writer. Obviously, you don't have a salary. So every time I got a little advance or a little money for something, I would immediately invest it. And so I'd done something very boring and virtuous and respectable, which is that I was buying for, I don't know, 10,000 rupees those days, which was quite a lot for us, buying RBI, Reserve Bank of India bonds in the name of my son, who was then a minor. And then I was told that, oh, you can't do this because you're, so I, you know, I thought the chap who was doing it for me didn't know what was happening. So I went to the Reserve Bank of India, and I've never forgotten. There I was at 10 in the morning at the Reserve Bank of India in Delhi. And they said, madam, you're not the natural guardian of your son. So, of course, this is our arrogance, you know. I said, do you know the meaning of the word natural? I asked him. So, but of course they said, madam, it's not our fault. And this is the Hindu minority law. Actually, what shocked me was several things. One was that by process of elimination, I had to be either Hindu or Muslim or Christian. You know, Buddhists and Jains and everybody was, I mean, if I'd wanted to be one of those, are subsumed under Hindu. So that was a strange thing. I thought we had this rational constitution which allows you to be atheist or even agnostic. Anyway, so that was the point. And what was really shocking was that if I said I was not married, then I could be the natural guardian. So obviously it has to do with patrimony, you know, so nobody, but if you get married, something happens to you. You're no longer the natural guardian. So I went and spoke to our wonderful friend and lawyer, Indra Jaising, and the Lawyers Collective said, you do the research and we'll do this pro bono. And we did do that. And we got what was supposed to be a landmark judgment, which is, they said, the woman can also be the natural guardian, which means that if the father's out of town, she can sign. And, you know, if the marriage breaks up, she doesn't have to be in fear, she'll lose access to her children. But I have never thought of it as a landmark because they didn't strike down the act. And it also made me very sad that we need the courts to tell us that a woman also has the right to be, you know, a guardian, because obviously the child's welfare means both parents have a right to parenthood. Both are equally responsible. You can't divide a responsibility and rights, you know, so that, but hopefully this is all a middle-class woman can do. You can fight where it's possible, and hopefully the precedent will be taken forward.
Yeah. Shashi, what difference did feminism as a political call make to your writing, Shashi?
I've been very clear about it. I mean, feminism was something which I embraced wholeheartedly once I realized that that was what I was thinking, but I was believing in without giving it a name. This is early 60s, late 60s, early 70s. So it wasn't very much there in India in the sense of, you know, being talked about, etc. But my sense of dissatisfaction, my sense of something wrong, etc., all got together, came to a point when I read, you know, an article about, like I've written in this interview, I read an article in one of the American journals, which wasn't very, you know, giving feminism much credit. It seemed to think it's an extreme movement. And perhaps it was at the beginning, I do not know. But for me, my feminism was always knitted into my own country, our own social problems, the status of women in this country. For me, this was where feminism began. And, you know, for me, it mattered a lot that this was a fight which has to be. I was never an activist in the sense, my activism, maybe I can say, is through writing, but I pursued it. You know, I pursued it through my writing, not by writing as a feminist. I write purely as a novelist, and I write creative writing, so I do not bring any agenda or ideology into it. Nevertheless, it is not possible for anyone to read my novels and view the world through the lens through which you would view it without ideas of feminism, you know? So I think that is the difference which people never seem to understand. You say you're a feminist, and you say your novels are not feminist. How can that be? Of course, a novel is an art form. It cannot be created according to any kind of a agenda. It takes its own shape. It's a living, dynamic thing. So I cannot sort of, you know, inject feminism into it. But the viewpoint, you know, is that of, I see the world, you know, as a feminist. I see men and women's relationship through that, you know, lens. So I think that long silence when I wrote it, I thought when I wrote it that here's this novel about a woman sitting in the four walls of her house and thinking about her own roles in life. And I thought nobody's going to publish this novel. if the people are going to get bored. So I was very sort of disheartened about the thing, but I knew I had to, it meant a lot to me. I had to write that novel to go on writing. I could not have written anything without writing that novel. And then I realized that it was a political novel. It is the politics of gender, which is, something which people don't take account of. It's highly political gender. I mean, every time I come across something like the Githa was telling us the Reserve Bank, I had to open an account in a bank in, we were in Nimmans at that time, went to Wilson Carton, went to the bank. My husband came to me to introduce me. And that man would not talk a word to me. Every word was understood. Finally, I said, hey, I'm opening the account. This is how it is that you're of no account at all. So it affects you in your everyday life. It affects women. Throughout the centuries, it affected women. It will continue if you don't, recognize what it is. I think that recognition was the important thing, that this is the problem. And like Gita says, questioning, for me, questioning is what led me to feminism. Questioning is what led me to my political views. Because I think unless you question, you don't know anything. Question yourself. I remember that I was told that when I was a very little girl, though it seems highly improbable now that I was ever little, I was told that my name was Kashala. Kashala in Marathi means why? Because I used to ask that question so often. So that name, that question has persisted. Questioning of myself, questioning of the world, questioning of other people. And I think that is, like Gita said, that's a great gift given to us to think for ourselves. And I think that's the greatest gift I feel I have got from life, is that I've always been able to think for myself. So I think out of that comes questions, out of that comes doubt, out of that comes certain new ideas. So that is so important that you question.
Yeah. And Shashi, I also want you to share with our audience something that we discussed the other day, the interview, and please.
But the story, oh yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, some from a magazine, a national magazine, one reporter had come to interview me. And while we were talking, it was all about my writing, by the way. It was about writers, it was a kind of series. And while we were talking, my grandson was then staying with us, a little boy of 3 or something. He just toddled in and toddled out. And I just said, he's my grandson. And then when the issue comes, the headline was, grandmother writes old-fashioned way. I tell you, I could have kind of killed somebody at that moment. What has my, I wrote a letter to them. I said, when you talk to a male writer, would you ever address him as a grandfather, even if he is so? Would you address him as anything but a writer? It was horrible. It took me 20 years to, get to terms with that experience and say, now it's over. I put it in, listen to me, my memoirs, and it's over now. But I thought it was atrocious.
I know. And like
Shashi's actually combined what the Poetic Voice is, Mamta,
Yeah.
because the Poetic Voice asks questions, the Poetic Voice gets angry, and the Poetic Voice has a sense of humor, because
super sense of humor.
Laugh, we wouldn't be able to write. If you didn't laugh every day, it's impossible to be a woman and certainly to be an Indian.
Has to laugh.
Yeah.
Has to laugh. There's a story about Virginia Woolf, which I have in one of my essays, where in fact, she says that I don't count for anything. I'm finished. All kinds of gloomy, dreadful things. And why? Because one of her novels was not reviewed, but they just put a little bit on the last page. So she thought that she's been so insulted. And I was remembering when a review of my novel came on the last page, I had the same feeling. I wanted to stamp my feet. And, I had to laugh when I read that in Virginia Woolf. I said, if she could say it, I mean, wonderful stories.
Yeah. But suddenly right at this moment, I remember Navneeta Dev saying, remember, Navneeta had invited all of us, and it was Gita, all of them are that generation. And I was the only one who was around and managing everyone. Suddenly there was this rift and a serious discussion about writers from small towns, writers writing in English, writers from bigger town, and My God, it was so good, a memorable lifetime experience for me. You know,
No, it
yeah,
was, yeah.
it was.
For me, it was memorable because I got the award from Nabnita and
Yes, yes.
Ashweta Devi.
Mashweta Devi.
Yeah,
Both of them were there that time, I fondly remember that. And I have a picture with Mashweta Devi and
okay.
Navnita. Okay, the next question is for both of you. How important is it to be informed about phases of feminism in Indian history, in history in general and literary history in particular? Um, Phases of feminism in history and literary history. How important is it for us to know about it? Because usually when we talk about history, we talk about history in a different phase. Feminism never comes in. So how important is it?
I think Geeta can answer first.
Geeta can answer.
Well, I'm going to enlarge the question, if I may. Um, uh, of course, I can only talk from my personal experience, but for me, the beginning with the questions, as Shashi said, of course, all of us, many of us, women have got politicized through the question of equality for women. Hmm? But it didn't take me long as a young woman to see that the that the women's movement must necessarily be allied with other movements. Otherwise, it made no sense. And as a young woman in Bombay, when the Mathura rape case happened in 1979, I learned a great deal from people like Ahalya Rangnekar. They were all out on the roads. The Forum Against Rape was formed, and I was actually taking photographs, but I'm also listening and learning. And then I realized that obviously there is a certain level of sisterhood, and you can talk about ideas that came from the West, the political parties and their women's movement organizations here, the autonomous women's movement, so on and so forth. But really the bottom line, the most important point, is that you cannot talk about equality for women without talking about equality, a caste movement, without talking about equality in terms of community, equality for Adivasis, and so on. So this actually complicates things, but it also includes. And in a way, I think our lives are a process of, you start off with the small world of your own and your family and your class, and then you keep including more and more people. That is the whole point, right? That's why we talk to each other. That's why we try and learn about each other. That's why we read, and so on and so forth. So for me, I'm not an academic. I'm not really terribly interested, though I should be, I suppose, but I haven't had the time so far to think in terms of specific aspects of feminism. And there's just so much discussion, and the old feminists, the new feminists. Let me put it this way. Every generation brings us ideas, gives us new approaches. A lot of the young feminists protest in ways that we would never have thought of. A lot of the older proto-feminists fought battles that we can't even conceive of. They fought battles to just learn how to read, in the 19th century or something, So I think that's what's important. How do you tie different movements together? And these are very, very important points for us, because we can pretend that that's all that matters. I'm saying this because I have been in sort of gender symposium. Say, once I was in some gender symposium in Yale University. I made myself very unpopular because there was some woman who, from the board of directors of something or the other, and she kept saying Pfizer, as a matter of fact. In these COVID times, everybody knows what that is. And she kept talking about women being on the board of directors. So a couple of us from, quote unquote, the third world finally got fed up and said, of course it's important for women to break the glass ceiling and be on the board of directors. But can we just talk about the really burning issues? There are I got very annoyed. I said, what about, does Pfizer also on the board of directors talk about women who are being experimented on in Bangladesh and India for their, injectables? Of course, they're all well trained in meeting that kind of thing. So what I'm trying to say is that it doesn't do to romanticize sisterhood. You have to complicate these matters. And that's why we are writers and readers, of course, and students and teachers. We like to complicate things.
Yeah, I agree with Gita to some extent. I mean, to a large extent. But history, it's not something which I, as a writer, I'm not a student or a teacher. But I can tell you how certain moments in history have affected me and made me more of a feminist in one way, and also influenced my writing. And one of the very rare examples which I came across a book, I read a lot of trash at times, and this one was about one of the queens of England, Henry II's queen. Henry II was that Becket killer. So his queen, Eleanor of Aquitaine, he had imprisoned her for 17 years, saying that she had incited their 4 sons to rebellion. 17 years she was kept in prison. Now this woman was such an able woman. She was a ruler of a duchy in Europe. When she came to England as a queen, she still was powerful until she was imprisoned. She was the mother of Richard, the Crusader, and she looked after the kingdom when he was not there. She tried to control her son, John. She was such a splendid example of what she lived until 75, which in those days was, almost impossible. She had 10 children and she looked after the children. She traveled from England to Spain in those days, crossing the mountains to bring a bride for her son. So this woman, historians have all written about her that she was a woman of poor morals. How else do you bring down a woman who shows that she is, greater than her husband and her son, Richard, who did nothing for his country, than to say that she was a woman of poor morals? So that taught me something. Then next thing was the suffragette movement. Gita was talking about movements we can't do what they did. And to read about the suffragette movement in England was an amazing experience for me. The cruelty, I thought these are English people. They're supposed to believe in fairness and justice. And they tied up women and, took out their teeth and pushed tubes into them and fed them. And it was a horrible kind of a movement. So that was another thing which, made me really think. And strangely, Gita, for me, the Mathura case, I was also at that time, eagerly taking in things. After a pause when I had my children and I was completely mother and I was coming out into the world. And this case sort of hit me hard, and I thought, here is this woman, a girl rather, who's in a police station at night and 2 policemen rape her. And the Supreme Court says that there are no marks of injury on her. Therefore, she succumbed and submitted. Therefore, it was not rape. And to me, the amazing thing was that 4 law teachers wrote a long letter to the Supreme Court, which came in the middle page of the Times. I read that and all their arguments. And I thought, here's a way to fight back, like Gita fought back for it's important, Gita, that what you did, that legal battle is very important. You just have to do that. And that's how the laws of rape kept getting changed through these cases and through people going to court. Just today we read about the skin to skin touch, which is not necessary at all. So, I think that there's so many things going on into the world, and as writers, we are open to the world. It's not that we are going seeking for knowledge. We are just open, and you never know what comes in, what gets into you, what makes you, irritates you so much that you have to write about it. As a poet, also you will know that. So I think one of them is women's lives. There's so many things which.
Shashi, how important is women writing to India?
Women writing is important to the whole world. Why India? It's important that women, men.
Right now.
Everybody should be able to write freely. It's a freedom of expression. I think this Gauri Deshpande, the Marathi writer, said that you have a right to write bad novels also.
Yeah.
It's not necessary that everyone should write a good novel. You've got a right to write. So I think it's important for anyone who wants to write to write.
Yeah.
And commercial writing also, I say now, okay, people who want to become commercial successes, it's okay. That's their way of living and thinking. I mean, who am I? I mean, I wouldn't be caught dead writing some kind of novels which are coming up, but it's up to the people to how they write.
True. Thank you very much. Now I would like to open the floor for our students. Kavana, whoever wants to ask the question, please focus on them. They include them into the
Yeah,
screen.
sure.
Whoever wants to.
Dita is there. Dita has joined us. He is
Whoever wants to ask a question can raise their hand.
Please
right?
raise the hand, students. Now it is time for students. After students, we'll open the floor for everyone. Yes, dear students. It need not be a question. It could be any kind of interaction. Yeah.
We've scared them, Shashi.
No. They are not scared.
No, there's Anurup.
Yes. Kavana, can you please bring Anurup in? Anurup, switch on your mic and camera.
Hello.
Yes. You are muted, Anurup. Kavana, can you pin him?
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, have I not pinned him for everyone?
Not yet.
Okay, I'll have to remove one of you from the spotlight then.
You can remove me.
Okay.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So the whole discussion which was going on was actually very interesting. There was actually a point when, even in the articles we read, where there was a point when it was touched upon that when men write women, it does not feel very authentic, and I raised this point even in my class as well. So my question is to actually both of you. When do you write male characters or like other characters which do not belong to the same identity group as you do? How do you retain that authenticity? Because as a young budding writer, I also feel that's kind of very tough to write very characters which are not me actually, right? Or very different from me. So how do you retain that authenticity?
Githa.
Well, first I would suggest that you sort of put authenticity, the word authenticity, in the freezer for a while, because it might freeze your writing. Because, of course, you can't be a writer if you are only writing about yourself. There are some writers who do a kind of confessional writing, and that is possible. But, most writers will find that quite tedious after a while. Your interest, because as a child, what do? You say, let's pretend, and you might, I remember my sons would take a dupatta and tie it around and say, I'm a farmer, or, wear it like this and say, I'm a queen. So that in a way is a childish image for what you do as a writer, which is a constant battle that you fight in day-to-day life, which is to get under the skin of whoever you live with or people you know, to try and understand them. And so in the process of understanding them, you're also in a way understanding yourself, because you're saying, this is how we are different, or this is how we're similar, So that process is what happens. So what are you doing? That is the work of the imagination. So, what if I were this powerful man with a gun? I've never held a gun in my life. I think I've seen one once, close up. Now, what would I feel like? What would that kind of feeling of power be like? So that is the work of the imagination. That's what makes you a writer.
Yeah.
And mind you, that's what makes you a reader. Because if we are only going to write about things we have experienced and read about things that we've experienced, the whole exercise is pointless. So you shouldn't worry about that. There are certain, you've actually asked a question within which there's another complicated question. Recently, when I wrote my novel, I Have Become the Tide, which also includes young Dalit students, which also takes up, not only the right to dissent, but also the Dalit movement. So a lot of people said, but you come from a background of caste privilege. How can you write about caste? Now, you are not making yourself the spokesperson. So it's a very delicate balance. You have to find creative narrative strategies to say, could it be like this? Could it be like that? You're not saying, and this is a problem that even anthropologists, academics might have. You don't go there and say, this is how these people live, this is what they think. You find narrative strategies to say, maybe it is this. Could it be this? You see? So it's a tricky issue, but that is both the excitement and the dangers and challenges of writing.
Thank you. And we have Dr. Githa Narayanan, who's the founder of Srishti, and I would now request her to please say a few words and share. Kavana, can you please pin Githa? Githa, can you please switch on the camera? Yeah, Githa is here.
I just had to turn on my mic. I've been
Yes.
listening to this fascinating conversation. And, first I have to thank Mamta because of bringing Shashi and Githa here today and bringing the voice, the very genuine voice of experience of people who have written for such a long time. I have fought many battles for feminism in my own world. I am not a writer, I'm just a teacher, but very often in the world that we all live in, we have different experiences. And as I was listening to all of you and to Mamta and her very vivacious way in which she got both of you to engage, I think that what I got from there is a sense of solidarity, a sense that today is a very special day, that we have achieved something. And even if none of us went to stand with the farmers, we were there, and it gives us hope. And as a feminist and as a teacher and as somebody who's been responsible to create spaces for creative writing, for people to write with their own voice and to speak with their own tone, it's very heartening to be here. I thought, Githa, your words of doubt, question, discuss, debate, dissent, that really resonated. And I hope it resonates with the students as well. Because if there's no doubt, there is no question.
Exactly.
If there's no question, there is no discussion. Without discussion, you can't take a position and debate. And without debate, you don't know whether you want to oppose. Simply taking an oppositional point today has become almost a fad in the new media world, right? You like or you don't like. You immediately put forward a position, but you haven't expressed really any valuable statement. You haven't taken any history into account. You have not taken experience into account. And there are so many points of gender which come from experience. We as women have gone through, and I mean, I'm now at the other end of the spectrum where ageism is another form of thing that I'm feeling. I'm sure Shashi and you resonate with it, because suddenly you've become too old to actually have an opinion, or you're an has-been, and it should be the voice of a younger person. I think that, to me, the creative writing program that Mamta and her colleagues at Srishti have put together is a very important point for allowing young people to have a voice, and for them to listen to you and to listen to the many points of change and inflection that you've dealt with in your lives is a very important thing for them to learn, because it's the first person. They're hearing it from somebody who's had that experience. And I can only say I was extremely privileged to be here today, to listen to both of you and to listen to the tremendous breadth of experience that has made you into not just the writers, but the word that you talked about, Githa, was knowledge. We have ways of knowing. And when Shashi said it's her novel, and she separates the novel from actual feminism, that the novel
Yeah.
is a work of art, and that the work of art stands on its own merit. I have very often had to fight for students and against what I call the establishment, saying, why don't you have placement for students? Can you placement? Can a creative writer be placed? They write, and they write because they have an inner voice, and their inner voice is for the world. It's not just within a little frame, you know. So I think you're very inspiring. I hope the young people who have been listening to you realize that they have to find their voice. And finding voices in India for the world, as not just for India, is very important. And I think that I got a lot out of it, and I want to thank Mamta. I'm sorry I preempted Mamta to bring me ahead before the students. I hope the students ask you a lot more questions. I just have to leave at 7 for something else. So thank you so much, and I hope to meet you both in person sometime. Right.
Thank you, Geeta.
Thank you.
Yeah, can we have our students now? Bhavya? Can you please ping Bhavya? Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
It's just there was this one question in the article that we read. It was about using myths to kind of comment on societal norms, and your answer to that really resonated with me, because even as a child, like there were a lot of questions that constantly came up and I was asking, and there weren't answers. I didn't know where else to kind of look at. And even like in these stories of Mahabharata, Ramayana, I've not been taught or read. I just kind of came across them in bits and pieces, and a lot of it didn't fit right. And it's also reminded me of like the Western fairy tales that I grew up with. A lot of it raised a lot of questions. So that was something that I just wanted to mention, that it, like, even today, if I see in my family with like my younger cousins, sisters, who they constantly questioning from such a young age, but they're just kind of shut or just labeled as disrespectful. But I think that it's important to kind of ask these questions, and like now, like there is like they know it's not wrong, and they're gonna continue do it. While I feel there are some people who might just shut down if they're told not to ask questions. Yeah.
I think as far as the myths are concerned, I think they are very fascinating stories, and I think it's important for us to read them with our own ideas. I mean, we have been told certain things. Draupadi is like this, and Arjuna is like that, and etc. But when you read them, you realize that they're real people. I mean, even Sri Ram, considered such a kind of divine. He was divine, but I think as soon as he killed Ravana, his divinity stopped there. So, what he did to Sita, I think that was one of the ways of saying that what he did to Sita was not really a part of the real Ram, something like that. So these are the questions which we can ask ourselves. And if you're a writer, you're lucky, because you can ask those questions of yourself and it comes out in your writing. If you're a poet, you can write a poem. I mean, poets have written wonderful poetry. So if you're not a creative person, then I think it's a little pressure of these things on you. And therefore you feel that you cannot ask questions. But I think always important to ask questions. Ask questions of your own self as well, because we accept certain things. So I was thinking this way, is that the right way to think? For me, the question that Draupadi started the war always sort of irritated me. And, I kept thinking that her husbands are Kshatriyas. Did they have to make her tell them to fight? Was it not their duty to fight? Would they not have just gone ahead and had the war? So, these are the things which trouble you. You're not being disrespectful to the myths, because those myths are there for everyone. So I think look at them as human stories and you get a lot out of them.
Yeah.
Bhavya, I want to add two tiny points. One, of course, is that there's no one telling of either Ramayana or
Yeah,
Mahabharata,
absolutely.
So depending on who's telling the story, you have various versions. And what does that tell us? It tells us that this is part of a huge legacy, that you inherit, that all of us inherit. And it is for us to use, I mean, if you get a big tin trunk that your grandparents have left you, and you open it and you decide what you will keep it, what you will keep, what you will throw out, and what you will use, for what. You know what I mean? So you might have a dish which is supposed to make kheer, but you might use it for something else, So
As an
what this
ashtray.
means, yeah, absolutely. So what this means is that you take these stories and make it meaningful for your times. Nobody can tell you that this is the story and this is how you have to read it. That's the important point.
That's lovely. Thank you. Kavana, would you want to ask? I see your hand. Pin yourself, please.
Just 1 second. I'm trying to figure out how to
Wait, I will. I think I
spotlight
can.
myself.
I have done it now. No, I can't.
And Ayush Menon wants to go next.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh,
very-
sorry. I think I distorted everything. I can do that, Kavana.
I'll add the 2 spotlights. You'll just have to add me. I don't
No,
think
I
I
have
can
done
do
it. Switch on your camera. You are there already.
But the 2 of them are no longer spotlighted.
No, no. On my camera they are.
Just 1 second.
Okay.
Yeah, can you see me?
Yes, yes, we can.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, so I'd like to start off by saying my major is creative writing. So this has been a really interesting and inspiring conversation to listen to. So thank you so much. Um, in the conversation, in the interview that we read between the two of you, you've talked about how, continuing what Bhavya was talking about, women in mythology. And so they've been portrayed in a certain way over a period of time. And now there has been a lot like the surge in retelling of these epics from the women's perspective, like Forest of Enchantments, Palace of Illusions, and then Sita by Amish. So I wanted to know what you think of those retellings, and how do you think they're significant for today's generation? And do you think that our generation still looks at these mythological figures as role models? Yeah.
I think you should tell us that the last question. I mean, do you look at them as role models? That's what you should tell us.
I think for me, not exactly as role models, but it's an example of how women were, and how, like, I think we can take a lot and learn a lot from them. But at least for me personally, I don't look at them as role models, but it's definitely something people to be inspired by, is how I would see it.
Just one more point before I hand it back to Gita is, this surge of writing, as you are saying, I'm very interested in that. I'm sorry, I haven't read any of them so far. So my reading has really come down. But, what I was thinking was perhaps English knowing writers or readers did not have very much great knowledge of mythology, because we could not read in the languages. And English, there's very little, and what is there is not very satisfactory. Whereas if you look at the language literatures, there's a lot of mythology. Mamta can tell us that there's Kannada or Marathi or, any language, there's a lot of it. So this surge is a kind of catching up, I would say. And also it's become a kind of trend, but I'm glad about it. So I do not know, I haven't read, maybe Gita has and can tell us what you think about these books. Because it is, for me, I am very curious about it. What are these young people trying to say or do?
Well, as Shashi said, the epics have been a source of, again, as I said, it's a legacy, and people and artists and filmmakers, a lot of Bollywood, a lot of the use of the grotesque is also from our epics and tales, you know. So there's a very long tradition. I know every generation likes to think that we have invented something or the other, but I can assure you that this has been done in many languages, successfully or not, in varying degrees of success all through. The current interest in myth, I have to say, self will intrude. I feel a bit of a pang because my very first novel used the myths, but you know, it wasn't trendy then. So that's okay. But what I'm saying is that today there is a combination of genuine interest. There's also market forces, because you also have people sort of looking at, say, for example, how to do management using the myth, you know, that sort of thing. Now, I may have my own opinion about it, but, you know, hey, diversity is good, and you have to read things and decide for yourself. Some of them are perfectly meretricious and not worth publishing, but some are quite interesting. And so we always need a variety. It's like your diet. You need a variety of things, and sometimes a little junk food is not a bad thing either. So let me leave it at that.
I agree with Githa that we need a lot of books to get some good books. You know, unless we have a lot of books, we won't get good books at all. So I think it's
so you
good.
can't admire a book simply because somebody is writing about myths. But you know, it's all a question of how you've done it. Just as you can't admire a book because they're writing about a genuine problem. You know, it's how you write about it.
Thank you.
I just have another question, if you don't mind answering. So for one of my Srishti projects, a group of us analyzed the role of women in Indian mythological films over time. So we started all the way from Raja Harishchandra to, we went to Sati Sumati, Sita Kalyanam, Peter Brook's Mahabharata, and then we came all the way to the 2000s with bad movies like Ravanan and Bahubali and everything. So what we observed while watching all those things, and we found that initially, like the older movies, like you've also mentioned in the interview, that it was always like the portrayal of the ideal wife or the ideal mother. And then as it went on, it became more like in our 2000s movies, it became an extremely sexualized mythological woman. So why do you think that even while, you know, everything else is advancing as we go forward in time, this perception of women went from one like really skewed perception to another really dangerous perception? Like it didn't evolve over time, rather it became from one bad thing to another. So yeah.
Well,
I think Geetha, yeah.
go ahead. Githa, go ahead.
Shashi. No,
Please,
please.
Shashi, on.
All right. Okay. You know, I think whereas films are concerned, I think the market forces are very strong. So I think that is something which you cannot, so too in literature, but much more in films. So you can never discount that. And this ideal woman thing won't work today, because I think we have had such a kind of lot of portrayals about women in movies, which are not sort of angle for the ideal woman any longer. So perhaps they feel that, you know, whatever it is, I think the movies sort of give us the male views. You know, it's the male fantasies which are played out in movies. That's the point. That so when a male wants a very good wife, or one, you know, put up with everything, suffer for him, look after him, whatever happens, etc. That you have that. Then you also have the sexual being, which is also what men want. So ultimately, a lot of these stories from myths are sort of male fantasies, not the two epics, because they are not male fantasies. They are very gritty and they're, you know, very real in some aspects. So this particularly movie world is, I think, so connected with money. There's a lot of money spent in making a movie. So I think that comes first. And therefore it goes according to what the, spectator would like. So today's world, when you see so much of sexy women everywhere, you can't have a movie showing a good woman, looking awful and, still make her seem that she's something great. The men would certainly like to see, and so would the women like to see women who are smart and well turned out, etc. So I think it's the consumer's dream that is being realized there. Sorry, it's very
let me
practical.
sort of, yeah, I'm sorry. I think that while progress has been made in a larger historical sense, I think what is really also important to acknowledge, and this is beyond market forces and this alleged desire of the public to see this, that, or the other, which is a very old and tired excuse we've heard forever. I think we have to admit that we are living in a time of great conservatism throughout the world. We know, of course, we're concerned with India. Great conservatism, great regression. Where, I mean, what do you say if you have a Khap Panchayat saying that you can't have a cell phone if you're female, or you can't eat chow mein because, that might make you think of sex? I mean, what? So from the irrational to the terrible kind of completely irrelevant norms that are brought back, plus the right wing, as well as the extreme conservatives of all communities, let's be fair, are always afraid of women, their sexuality, and the whole idea is to keep control of them. One thing you have to remember is that we are a caste-ridden society, and the basis of caste is endogamy. What does endogamy mean? You have to make sure that women don't produce children with other groups. This is what your study of sociology and history will teach you. So the control of women's sexuality has always been central, and it continues to be. So don't be fooled by the apparent veneer of modernism in the movies, the apparent sort of clothes and so on. So what do you see? You see ideas like Karwa Chauth, practices like Karwa Chauth brought back and given a modern veneer. So I think we should be very careful about only talking about the market forces, because the battle today is a cultural war, and women are very much a part of it. Gender is very much a part of it.
Thank you, Gita. Thank you, Kavana.
Thank you.
And now I would request Sri Kripa to switch on your camera. Yeah, Sri Kripa, please.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I find that once I left K through 12 and entered Srishti, my political environment changed very drastically. But the thing is, art school is a bubble. Maybe in these spheres, like, I can speak the way that comes to me naturally, as well, all of these things that I am, perceived as a woman, this and that. But the second I step out of this sphere, I find that I radically need to change the tone in which I speak. Not just like the emotional tone, but just so that I don't get taken lightly or dismissed as this emotional, hysterical, man-hating feminist. And when I do package my words or anything that I want to convey outside this realm, I find that a lot gets lost in translation. Is this like a common experience? Yeah,
I think you're absolutely on the right path, Sri Kripa. And this is, it's one thing to have beliefs and ideas. It's another thing to live them on a day-to-day basis. So it's all very well for us to say we believe in equality and this and that. But to live that on a daily basis, to make choices, life choices based on that, that is really the hard part. And then you try and communicate with other people. There are some people, there's really no point trying to convert them because they're not open to dialogue. So it's a waste of time. But so you just have to figure out how you can try and live and work in consonance with your views.
I think we had this question in the interview. how is it to live feminism day by day, and how hard it is to live it. Many times you have to sort of compromise. So, you don't want to, but you do because there are other people in your world. You're not the only one in the world, especially I've mentioned children. You can't do anything at the cost of children's needs. So I think this is a question we all have to solve ourselves. It's being very honest to know that it is there. That exactly. I think that honesty is important to me more than anything else. Don't fool yourself.
Thank you, Shri Kripa. Thank you. Did you have anything else to ask? Is that over?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bandana, switch on your cameras, please. We will have 3 more questions. Oh, yes. And there was one person, PhD.
Yes, Ayush, I'm very concerned that...
yeah, Ayush will come again. Ayush, be ready. Okay, Vandana. Yeah. We can't hear you, Vandana. Can't hear you.
You have to unmute yourself. This is the great metaphor of our times. Unmute yourself.
Try speaking. Have you plugged your... No, we can't hear you. Just check your audio. In the meanwhile, I'll call Ayush. Oh, Maithili, yeah. Please, I'll get back. Ayush?
Hi, yeah. I'm audible, right?
Yes, wait a minute. Yeah. I'll pin you. Add pin. Yes, Ayush. Good.
Hi. Okay. So it's a little bit of a tangent, but it's also sort of related to another question that was asked. But so sometimes the written word is criticized as it's a rather elitist form of activism because of the sort of limited audience that it ends up reaching. Through history, the written word has sort of been limited to the more privileged socioeconomic classes. And yeah, you can say that it has changed because the reach of literature has expanded exponentially. But I wondered if you had any insights into sort of how that reach has developed, especially in places where socioeconomic issues are generally attributed. Yeah.
I think as writers, at least I'm extremely conscious of the fact that what I am doing is not a great service to the world. I'm expressing something which is in me, and perhaps one person, 2 persons might read that and might change. But one does not write with the hope of dealing with any kind of issues or with the hope of changing the world. There is a sense of guilt, always a sense of guilt about that. I mean, like I've compared it in one of my essays to War and Peace, where you have this very rich man, Pierre, who goes into the soldiers to see the war. And, they just ignore him. There's so much suffering and death going on around him. And they wonder what he's doing there. And he asked himself the same question. And I always compare writers, painters, etc., to that person who thought, he's going to observe the war. And what he observes is suffering in which he has no place at all. So it's a very difficult kind of feeling of being useless. And it's intensified in times of stress, when there's a national problem, when there is a huge issue, and activists are doing a lot. And what am I doing? Of what use is my writing? I think that's the first essay in my book. Is the writer an activist? The writer, according to me, is not an activist. It's something which could be very useful for some people. At the same time, it's not there to be of use to people, but you learn from it. I mean, at least that's another thing which I have learned as a reader, how much I have changed as a human being through my reading. It's amazing what reading can do to you. So these are incalculables. You cannot put them on the same level as other activities which are directly helpful, which help a lot of people. I think it has to be looked at in a different way. I'm sure Githa can add to that.
Yeah. Well, why you write, and of course, it's sad that we have to divide the word into the written word and the spoken word, or, because poetry and music, as we saw in 2019, they actually pushed the boundary on the streets of what might be considered poetry. Now, the written word, of course, there are practical limitations, not just because it's the written word, but also what language you're writing in and how many people can read that language and how many people can afford to buy a book and so on and so forth. Okay, so as Shashi said, you don't have any illusions, but then why do you write? That's one of the great mysteries of life. Why did those people make those cave paintings, you know? So that there's that level, which I'm not going to go into. But I do want to point out that when it comes to a kind of, what shall I say, you're not so much that you're sending a message across. You're actually trying to make a work of art. But the writer and the citizen, the writer and the human being live in the same place. So your views of the world, the values you hold dear, the world you want to see, the way in which you want all of us to live, all that comes through in the writing. Plus, as a citizen, you do have access more than other people, you know, to that small square inch of the public stage. So how do you use that is terribly important. You know, so I think that might be one way in which you can actually communicate with fellow citizens directly. But so it is something that I think you can be a writer and a committed citizen. I'm not using the word activist because I think that's unfair to these genuine full-time activists who put themselves out on the line on a daily basis.
Thank you, Ayush. Bandana, I think your mic is working now. Let me ping you, switch on your camera and just see if it's working. You're muted.
Mamta, I'll like spotlight them. I
Okay,
think
all
you can
right.
the two spotlights as
Yes,
well.
yes, please. After this, you can continue. Okay, Bandana.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Thank God. Okay. So my question is like regarding the battle of feminism. I want to ask how is the experience, or how do you deal it when that like battleground is your own house or your own like family? Because for me personally, I find it easier to stand up against a man on the internet or on the road, but when that man is like my dad or my uncle or my brother, it's like a completely different. I don't even have a voice, so like I want to ask, like, how did you both deal with it?
That would be asking, huh, Shashi?
I didn't get the question. Would you mind repeating it to me, Githa? I didn't get the question.
Bandana wants to know how, because it's all very well to stand up against an anonymous male in the world at large, but when it comes to the family, how difficult it is, because nobody even, thinks you have a voice. You're absolutely right, Bandana. This is what we're talking about living your ideas and how difficult it is. So how did we do it?
She was also
Shashi,
asking, how would you deal with your father, brothers, and uncles
By being stubborn.
when they are that? Yeah.
By being very stubborn and sticking to your ideas. That's what worked for me.
I think, in my generation, we didn't really have that many role models, middle-class women who said, no, we won't get married. No, we won't, we'll go live on our own, and all the sorts of things that we did at that point. So the thing is to fight and get a job, because you can't expect to be underwritten if you disagree with what they want. So if you're going to lead, and you'll be amazed, Bandana, much later you earn respect. It might be a little late in coming sometimes, but you actually, not only do you earn their respect, but you begin to understand their anxieties, even though you still think they're wrong. When you become a parent yourself, you begin to understand their anxieties. But let me tell you another thing, which is that no generation gets it completely right. All of us, plan to be excellent and liberal and egalitarian parents, but it's a work in progress, every generation.
All right, thank you. And here we have Maithili. And Maithili, can you please switch on your camera? Maithili?
One moment.
Yeah.
So a lot of domesticity here, domestic chores to be completed, and I was enjoying myself thoroughly.
Okay.
I would like to.
Kavana, would you like to pin her, please? Kavana?
Thank you so much, Mamta ma'am, for
No, just
sharing
hold
this
on.
with me. And I would have hated to have missed this for anything in the world.
Can you please introduce yourself and then...
There is nothing to introduce myself.
Look at that.
No.
That's exactly
I'm in
what
the
we should-
presence of some really exalted and really great thinkers. And I think it's a great, great opportunity you have created for these youngsters. And the title itself mentions how one can lead oneself to think. And I think with Shashi ma'am here and Githa ma'am, and you
Maithili is a professor in Jain University.
So
Hindi.
my background is Hindi literature, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah, I teach Hindi, and this was a truly blessed time that I have spent, and thank you so much. And what I would like to tell the youngsters is keep asking questions, and I think Mamta ma'am with this course has initiated you into that process of asking questions. Whatever zone or area you are in, you should ask questions, especially the last question which was asked by that young girl about in the family, how do you do things and all. You have Githa ma'am here, you have Shashi ma'am here, who represent that huge ocean of writing, especially by women, though I don't want to get gender specific, but writings of, protest writings themselves, whether it was by men or by women.
I think we lost her.
Lost. Gone.
Okay, we have two more questions. Anybody can question in the sense interaction. It need not be a question. You can even just, and we need to wind up soon.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much.
But we lost you anyways. Thanks a lot, Maithili.
No,
Thanks a lot.
I was just saying that writers, when they write and they pen down their thoughts, it's like a lighthouse for the others. It shows the path, it shows the direction, and you just keep reading and keep following the path and listen to your heart. That's what Shashi ma'am and Githa ma'am have done. And Mamta ma'am has followed that legacy. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Mamta ma'am.
Maithili, for coming. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Do we have any other persons? You can all switch on your cameras, please. Please switch on your cameras. Everyone. So I see Sandeep here. Sandeep, did you want to share anything? Sandeep Ashwath is a faculty in Srishti.
Oh, hi. Hello. Thank you very much for this talk and thing, Mamta. I mean, I was just thinking that the other in the feminist movement is also, it's not completely has become, it's not completed, that project. I mean, the male we are not completed in that project of patriarchy. It's you're in the process of undoing many things in a way. I mean, for me, I find that the point that Shashi Deshpande made about histories, also I find that personal histories, just my grandmother or several people, it was important to know that my grandmother, who's extremely poignant life for 50 years, that she kept a stack of James Hadley Chase and Agatha Christie hid in her cupboard. And she had a journal, and her act of doing that and putting perhaps cardamom in her mouth every day, or, just simple things, which is not written about, so it's just looking through history also for characters, people around you who's very, very gentle or very stern but gentle attempts of being feminist in their own way. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep.
Mamta, Dita is asking a question.
Yes, please. switch on your camera, can you? Can you please switch on your camera?
Isn't it?
Can't.
Speak up when you're trying to.
I'm trying to. I
Can
put it on video, start, but I can't start the video.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Maybe I will ask to start the video. Can you click that now? I've asked to start the video.
Shall I press the button video start? Is that right?
Yes, you are right. Yes, there you are. Okay, please.
There.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, please go ahead.
All right. I don't have any questions as being one of the oldest students of Shashi. And all the questions I had during the last 18 months, she answered. And she answered in such a way that I couldn't think of any more questions. But I would like to come back to the point, mythology, myths. You mentioned in your last email that you had started again, perhaps, writing on myths or dealing with myths. And I would be very happy if you now, after you have finished so much work, would continue working on the next collection of essays, starting with your versions of myths, because I think Indian myths have to be rewritten. You have to write back to them, to quite a few, and you have started already, I know, but that would be something I would expect you to do.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you very much. And now I would also love to show this book he's one of the persons who has compiled this book, Shashi's new book.
They were wonderful, both of them.
Thank you. Yes. Thanks a lot for being here with us. And anybody else? Do I see a hand? No. Ayush, you said you had something to answer. Ask, would you like to ask now?
No, that's all right. I managed to tie it into one of the other discussions that was happening.
All right. Fine. Thank you. And I think we just wanted you for 1 hour, and thanks for being with us for 1.5 hours. Both of you, it enriched us. It is so nice, and I think my students really enjoyed this whole session. Thank you. I would like to thank you on behalf of the studio which we are running, and also Srishti Manipal Institute of Art Design and Technology. Thanks a lot. Can everybody switch on the camera so that I can just take a picture?
Mamta, Mamta, I need to thank you.
Shashi, thanks a lot.
Making me learn to go on to Zoom. I would have died without going on Zoom otherwise.
Shashi, you are so good. Now you are a hero, on the Zoom. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.